I'm just gonna vibe. Listen to some lo-fi. Hunt down some amethysts. And read my textbook. I just didn't want it to be a black screen. Chapter 1. The Science of Psychology. This is already very boring. I don't like this. It's written like stories. That's lame. Anyway. Oh, wait, looking at the ceiling now. Okay. It was the first day of the semester. Parking, as usual, was a challenge. Christian finally found a spot, parked his car, and headed towards campus while grabbing a coffee at the college cafe. He ran into his friend Andrew. "Hey man, what's up?" he asked. "Not much," Andrew replied. "Just getting coffee before I head to class." "What are you taking?" Christian asked. "Well, I've got math and music appreciation tomorrow. I'm heading to the psych class now." Christian smiled and said, "Cool. I've got the psych class now too." People don't fucking talk like this. Literally nobody fucking talks like this. That sounds pretty. You know, I don't think I need to read that part, because that part's boring and it doesn't matter. So, okay, here's the actual information. 1.1, what is psychology? Welcome to the world of psychology, the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. But what exactly does that include? Behavior includes actions, feelings, and biological states such as sleeping. Mental processes include problem solving, intelligence, and memory, just to name a few. Psychology is a science because psychologists conduct research in accord with the scientific method. That is a poorly structured sentence. Because psychologists conduct research in accordance with the scientific method, a systematic process used to test the ideas about behavior. Psychologists analyze the behavior of humans as well as other species. Psychology is probably one of the few disciplines in which students come to the first class believing they already know much about the topic. We see psychologists and psychiatrists on talk shows, Dr. Phil and Dr. Drew, and listen to them on the radio. We frequently see them depicted on television and in movies. Many of these portrayals are quite entertaining, but they do not always represent psychology accurately. As a result, the public image of the discipline tends to be distorted. The purpose of this textbook is to help you develop a deeper understanding of psychology. In this chapter, we will explain what psychologists do, how they think, and where they work. It is a general overview of the field of psychology. An introduction to the more specific areas of psychology discussed in subsequent chapters. This is so fucking wordy. This is so wordy. Oh my god, I'm gonna read and paraphrase it because that will just assist me better. We're just gonna mine some of this while I just like process what the fuck I just read. Okay, that's enough distraction. Back to the skimming. So, a large portion of psychologists counsel or otherwise treat clients, and they hold a doctorate degree in psychology, and they complete a lot of research. That's nice. Okay. I don't really understand why that's important. I've got a whole stack of that now. Psychology is rooted in scientific research, yes. Oh. Oh no. Okay. This is incredibly boring and way too many words. That was loud. A psychologist's explanation on a particular behavior is a theory. A theory is an explanation of why and how things work. We all at times fancy ourselves as psychologists. We interact with people all the time. We observe others' behaviors and our own personal experiences. Ugh, shut up. Shut the fuck up. This is so annoying. This textbook is fucking boring. Psychology teaches you about critical thinking. Fucking fantastic. I'm just gonna read the definitions in the sidebar because the actual text is fucking annoying. And so boring. Why are there so many words? You don't need this many words. This could be way fewer words. What the fuck? Okay. Psychology. The scientific study of behavior and mental processes, yes. Scientific method. A systematic process used by psychologists and other scientists for testing a hypothesis about behavior. Theory and explanation of why and how a behavior occurs. So we've got true and false questions here as well. We are either left-brained or right-brained. That is false. We only have 5 senses. False. During sleep, the brain rests. False. It never rests. Dieting is an effective way to lose weight. Not really, because of the fucking brain chemicals. Punishment is more effective than reinforcement. False. Our memory works like a video recorder. False. Intelligence is primarily encoded in our genes. False. Most adults experience a midlife crisis in their 40s or 50s. I don't know the statistics on that one. Opposites attract. False. Is it? I don't know. It's hard to know. Personality is set by our teenage years. Kind of false. Stress is caused by bad things that happen to you. True? But the way that it's worded is confusing. Schizophrenia means you have multiple personalities. False. In order for therapy to be effective, you must confront issues from your childhood. It depends on the issues, my guy. Pseudopsychology. psychological information or conclusions that sound scientific but have not been systematically tested using the scientific method. Examples of pseudopsychology include phrenology, the study of the bumps on the head and whether or not that affects how smart you are, essentially, and your like personality and shit. There's other ones, that's just the big one that I know, like off the top of my head. Critical thinking, thought processes used to evaluate and analyze information and apply it to other situations. Cool, cool. Quiz myself! Woo! Which of the following statements is true? Psychology is just common sense. Psychologists study only mental health disorders. Psychologists know why people behave the way that they do. Psychologists test ideas about behavior according to the scientific method. D. Which of the following topics would a psychologist study? Weather patterns in Africa, memory changes in adults, causes of the Vietnam War, all of the above. Probably B. Which of the following statements is not a Which of the following statements is not a pseudopsychology claim? Transplant organs carry personality traits that are always transferred from donors to receivers? Walking on hot coals without burning one's feet requires paranormal abilities? You can make a blood clot in your brain disappear by humming? Several studies show a relationship between academic development and self-esteem. D? It's gotta be D, because that's the only one that sounds even sort of normal. The book says my answers are right. Pog. Okay. Goals, hypothesizes, and methods. The main goals of psychology are to describe behavior, to predict behavior, to explain. Okay, wait. Let's rephrase this. The main goals of psychology and psychological research are as follows. To describe, predict, explain, and control or change behaviors. Description involves observing events and describing them. If you observe two events occurring together rather reliably or with general frequency and or regularity, you can make a prediction about events. Two events regularly occur together. That doesn't tell us what causes it. Yeah. More crowded. Okay. There we go. Look, that's a graph. I like the graph. Let's look at the graph. Let me just cross my legs here and look. Ow, my knees. Ow. Oh, that didn't feel very Gucci. Describe behavior. Predict. Explain. Okay, there we go. Okay, describe behavior. Observe events and behaviors, then look at how they're related. Predict behavior. Predict what events or behaviors may occur based on their relationship. Suggest and test an explanation in the form of a hypothesis. Control or change the behavior. By explaining and understanding the causes of behavior, psychologists can create programs or treatments to control or change behaviors. Okay, oh, here we go. Issue to be studied. You make predictions about beer drinking. You form a hypothesis. Students who buy pitchers of beer tend to drink more than the students who buy it in bottles. You choose a research method and conduct a study that measures how much beer college students who buy pitchers consume versus how much beer college students who buy bottles consume. You collect and analyze the data. Does the data support or reject your prediction? Results support your hypothesis. You can replicate your study or make additional predictions and test them. If the results do not support your hypothesis, you can revise the hypothesis or pose a new one. This is just rewording the scientific method. Okay. Fuck me, dude. These words are so many and they are so boring. Why do they put so much filler in here? I hate it. Okay, a predictive hypothesis, an educated guess about the relationships among variables. Okay. So that's saying because one thing happens, another thing will happen as a cause and effect type dealio. Causal hypothesis is an educated guess about how one variable will influence another. Population of interest, the entire universe of animals or people that could be studied. Sample, the portion of the population of interest that is selected for the study. Naturalistic observation is observing behavior in the environment in which the behavior typically occurs. An example of that would be an example. Ooh. Yeah, anyway, I understand that. An example of that would be like a home sleep study or something. Yeah, school playground, that's a pretty good example. Case study. An in-depth observation of one or a few participants or settings. Generalizability. How well a researcher's findings support other individuals and situations. Which is why you wouldn't use a case study, because a case study is too small. If you wanted to make a more generalized study, you would need a wider sample size. Survey, a research method that asks a large group of people about their attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. Now, you also have to make sure that the survey you're observing is unbiased. It's very important because if it's a biased survey, the data is skewed and it is not correct. It's not objective. Yeah, it says so right here. Knowing which behaviors are related to a higher frequency of illness enables a psychologist to predict who is more likely at risk for physical or mental illnesses. However, who you ask to complete a survey and how you ask them are critical elements in distinguishing a good survey research from biased research. Recall that a random sampling of participants minimizes sampling bias. The more representative the sample is, the more the results will generalize to the population of interest, which is the everybody. A second critical element of the survey method is how the questions are worded. A respondent has to be able to understand the question and interpret it in the way the researcher intended. It is important to make questions clear and precise to obtain accurate estimates of people's feelings, beliefs, and behavior. For example, differences in survey questions and wordings have been found to have an influence on rape estimates and estimates of adolescent sexual behaviors. In summary, surveys are advantageous in that they allow psychologists to pose a lot of questions to a large sample of people. Accurate information can be gathered in a relatively short period of time, yet the survey's wording, the representatives of the sample, and whether people chose to answer the questions honestly can bias the results. For example, the Pew Research Center set out to compare the values, attitudes, and behaviors of millennials with those of today's older adults using the survey method with a nationally representative sample of 1,821 adults, including 600 participants between the ages of 18 and 33. Not surprisingly, they reported differences among the groups in behaviors associated with the use of technology. For example, 55% of millennials reported having posted a selfie on a social media site compared to 24% of Generation Xers, those born between 1965 and 1980, 9% of baby boomers, those born between 1946 and 1964, and 4% of the silent generation, those born before 1946. The silent generation is named that because of the silent films of the era, which is very neat, unrelated to the topic at hand. But I think that's very cool. 81% of millennials have created a profile on a social networking site such as Facebook. Interestingly, the millennials appear to be less trusting of others, with just 19% reporting that most people can be trusted, compared with 30% of Gen X, 34% of baby boomers, and 37% of the silent generation. Millennials are the least overtly religious American generation since survey research began measuring it, but are most likely to support same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, and the legalization of marijuana. What accounts for these reported differences? Survey research cannot explain the differences. It can be used only to describe and predict behavior. However, we can generate multiple hypotheses as to why these generational differences occur. They could be due to the unique historical circumstances or social movements experienced by each generation, such as wars or technological advances. They could be due to changing social roles, longer life expectancies, or varying economic factors, or some combination of these factors. Also keep in mind that there are as many differences within generations as there are among them. Yet, from survey research, we get a glimpse at attitudes, values, and behaviors of the millennials. As the post-millennials, or Generation Z, those born after 1997, approach adulthood, it will be interesting to see how they compare. Very fun to know that my fiance is Generation Z and I'm a millennial. Cringe. Very cringe. Hate that. Anyway. Oh my god, deep breath. I just read all of that without breathing very much. My head hurts. I hate it. I need Gemma! I need Gemma! Hi, Gemma! Gemma's here. Hello. Hello. Hi, honey. I love you. Oh, you're standing on my bladder, and that hurts. That hurts so much. Please. Hi, kiddo. Nope. Whoa. Oh. I am now thoroughly distracted. What a good dog. I love you, kiddo. Oh, hi, honey. You know, I forgot to take my meds this afternoon. I got a bit distracted. Gemma on the move. Gemma on the move. She's gonna get the cat, I bet. Oh, my knees hurt. Oh! Thank you for standing on my tit, kid. Really appreciate it. I want to put a pickaxe in my offhand really bad. Ah, that's kind of cool. Anyway. I'm gonna break a couple of these and then get back to my reading. Just kind of wanted to vibe for a minute. My brain hurts. So that's how you get amethyst shards. You're a squinky friend. Well, that's unfortunate. So I'm gonna spawn back here. Fuck, I don't want to be here. Okay, well. Anyway. Back to my reading. Correlational studies test relational studies test the relationship or correlation between two or more variables, television watching and violent behavior, or depression and gender, for example. The researcher does not control the variables, but rather measures them to see whether any reliable relationship exists between them. For example, if we were to measure your weight, what other variable might show a relationship to your weight? Your height, your calorie consumption, your gender, your age, your life expectancy. If you were going to measure all of these variables, I have to turn the page and fucking move my legs around because they hurt. Okay, if you this is fucking awful. I'm bored and I hate this. I'm adding another blanket. I want to be cozy. You might find that all of them vary in relation to weight. These relationships are correlations. The strength of a correlation is measured in terms of a correlation coefficient, a statistic that tells us how strong the relationship between two factors is. Correlation coefficients range from -1 to +1. The closer the correlation coefficient is to either negative or +1, the stronger the correlation, or the more related the two variables are. A -1 and a +1 is a That's not right. A -1 or a +1 is a perfect correlation. The value of one variable always exactly predicts the value of the other. For example, every time people get angry, they hit something? The closer the correlation efficient is to 0, the weaker the correlation. This is so fucking boring. You don't need this many words to say what you're trying to say. Positive correlation, a relationship in which increases in one variable result in increases to the other. Negative correlation is a relationship in which increases in one variable corresponds to a decrease in the other, which would mean a negative or a fucking 0 correlation coefficient. That's fucking, oh my god. It's a neutral. It's neutral, a neutral correlation. A neutral correlation is where there's not really anything together. It's just, yeah, it's a scatter plot. Correlational studies enable researchers to make predictions about behavior, but they do not allow us to draw cause and effect conclusions. For example, there is a positive correlation between academic achievement and self-esteem. Students who have high academic achievements also tend to have self-esteem that is high. Similarly, students who have low academic achievement tend to have low self-esteem. High academic achievement may cause an increase in self-esteem. However, it is just as likely that having high self-esteem causes one to do better academically. There may be a third variable, such as the parent's educational level or genetics, which actually causes the relationship between academic achievement and self-esteem. A correlational study does not tell which of these explanations is correct. The only research method that may draw us to cause conclusions is an experiment. Although several types of research methods are used to test a predictive hypothesis, only one research method can test a causal hypothesis, the experiment. We will discuss several features of the experiment, including its advantages and disadvantages. Necessary conditions for an experiment. Two main features characterize an experiment. First, the variables in the study are controlled or manipulated. Second, participants are randomly assigned to the conditions of the study. When these two conditions have been met, causal conclusions may be drawn. Let's first turn our attention to the issue of experimenter control. The point of the experiment is to manipulate one variable and see what effect this manipulation has on another variable. These variables are termed independent and dependent variables respectively. The independent variable is the variable that the experimenter manipulates, and it is the cause of the experiment. When the researcher is testing, it is independent or not being affected by the other variables of the study. The dependent variable measures any result of manipulating the independent variable. It is the effect in the experiment. It is dependent on or influenced by other variables in the study. Why are there so many pages? How many are there? Oh, thank God there's only like 20. This is so boring. Experiment participants randomly assigned to groups. Control group gets 8 hours of sleep. Experiment group gets 4 hours of sleep. Daily activities and testing conditions are the same. Memory test scores. So, the independent variable is the amount of sleep. The same testing conditions are present, and the dependent variable would be how the memory is. The typical experiment divides participants into two types of groups, the experimental group and the control group. The experimental group includes those participants who receive the manipulation that is being tested. The control group indicates those includes those participants who do not receive the manipulation that is being tested. They serve as a baseline comparison for the experimental group. Both groups are then measured on the dependent variable to see whether there is any difference between them. In some experiments, a control group receives a placebo, or inactive substance, such as a sugar pill, rather than being given nothing. This is to control for the placebo effect. The placebo effect occurs when participants show changes simply because they believe or expect a treatment to have a certain outcome. In double-blind studies, neither experimenters nor participants know who is receiving a placebo and who is receiving the actual treatment. They are blind to which group, experiment, or control a person has been assigned to. This way, neither the participants nor the experimenter's expectations will bias the results. Suppose, for example, we wanted to study the effects of sleep deprivation. Specifically, we hypothesized that sleep deprivation causes deficits in memory. This is a casual hypothesis that can be tested with an experiment. We decide to manipulate the amount of sleep participants receive to see whether it has been having an effect on memory. In this experiment, we are interested in one's amount of sleep. Other variables do not influence the amount of sleep because we are going to control the amount of sleep to see whether one's memory depends on how much sleep one receives. Therefore, memory is dependent and sleep is independent. For the purposes of this experiment, some participants, the control group, will be allowed to sleep 8 hours per night for the week of our study. Others, the experimental group, will be allowed to sleep only 4 hours each night. The experiment has set or controlled the amount of sleep at 2 levels, 8 and 4 hours. Each day of our study, we measure the participants' memory by having them complete several memory tasks. At the end of the study, we compare the memory scores of participants who received 8 hours of sleep with those who received only 4. To be sure that it is the amount of sleep affecting memory and not something else, we need to be sure that we have controlled any variable that may influence this relationship. These potentially problematic variables are called confounding variables. What confounding what this is boring. Hello, Gemma. When we know that two events regularly occur together, which goal of psychology is met? Predicting. Pog. Dr. Hincapie wants to test the hypothesis that stress increases blood pressure. What type of hypothesis is Dr. Hincapie interested in testing? D. No, it's B. Fuck. In an experiment on attitudes, participants were given either positive or negative information about a speaker and then asked to evaluate the effectiveness and Made it to the last question, but I dozed off a little bit. I probably have to read that shit about ethics. That's just gonna have to fucking wait, man. I'm so tired that words don't even look real anymore. So I'm just gonna go to bed, I guess. I tried my best to read, but I made it to fucking page 19 and now my brain's rioting. My brain doesn't like what I'm trying to do very much.